So I'm going to talk to you about a researcher's perspective on biochar feed because I'm completely new to the topic of using biochar as a feed additive, and I'm a researcher, and I'll give you my impressions here. So first of all, I'm working for Norwegian Institute of Bioeconomy Research in Norway. The institute has about 300 employees located all over Norway. And the focus of the institute is between soil and agriculture, economics, different topics. And in Ås, there's also a university, so we share the campus with the university, focusing on similar topics. And I've done my PhD here on the topic of biochar, so I've been working with biochar for the last 8 years. I worked mostly with characterizing biochars produced at different temperatures. So I've tried to map the transformation of biomass with pyrolysis temperature. And we recently got funding to do a project on the use of biochar in feed. And in Norway, there's at the moment no farmer that I know of that is using biochar as an animal additive, and there are no research projects on biochar feed. So we started at the beginning of this year, and our first challenge was to go out and learn about it. And I heard that there were some people in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland who are applying this technology, and so I got some contacts, and several people referred me to a company called EM, and they've been very welcoming, and I went and visited Uli Rottenbuller in, I forget the name of the city, but it was in Switzerland, and he introduced me to a farmer named Roland Fuchs. And the company produces a biochar feed supplement. You can take a look at it later. It's here. It's made of wheat bran. It contains 10% charcoal and sugarcane molasses, among other things. And the sugarcane molasses is used to pre-process this feed because it goes through an anaerobic fermentation with lactic acid bacteria and some other effective microorganisms. So I found out that EM stands for effective microorganisms. And it's a company that's been running for 20 years. Actually, the farmer and the owner of the company have been working together for 20 years to try to make the most ideal feed for animals. And this farmer has pigs, he has cows, chickens, horses, cats and dogs, llama. They all get this, it's called carbon feed product. And they began with first only affected microorganisms in the mixture, and recently, I'm guessing 5 years or so back, maybe more, they started incorporating the biochar into it and applying it. And so first I want to give you the impressions that I got from the farmer who is using this feed. Some of these things were mentioned already, that the use of biochar in feed is especially helpful during times of stress. So, for example, when the piglets were brought to a new environment and introduced to new food, I think this farmer fed them only this carbon feed, which has 10% biochar content, and then a regular dosage is 2 to 3% of this carbon feed, and remember it's therefore 0.2–0.3% biochar in the feed. And he's been antibiotic free for 2 years, so that means none of the animals on the farm get any antibiotics. He was very proud of this. And he said he simplified the animal production method because he never cleans the stalls. None of the tubing that removes the manure needs to be washed or unplugged, because he doesn't, it's a natural microflora that builds up, and he has no problem with stoppage of the tubes in the system. He also had a lot of laying hens, and they were quite, well, it was a normal hen production, as far as I could see. And he told me that it's producing 30 to 40% less ammonia from the feces, and that meant that you see that there's a white belt collecting the chicken droppings underneath the cages. He's only cleaning that every 10 days, so that's a lot of reduced labor for him. And as far as I understand, it's often problems with flies in chicken houses. I didn't notice any flies. The environment was okay. And I also asked him about pecking, because I know that chickens often peck at each other's feet because of stress, because of lack of nutrients. And he said, yeah, a lot of people ask me about that, but it's not a problem. So he had a very good working system. Here I'm showing you the cow stalls, and the cleaning is very simple. He would, it's an automatic system to remove the manure, but there would be no washing. This is it. And like I said, it was because there was a healthy microflora in the stall which outcompeted any pathogens that could make the animals sick. So he's introducing the biochar feed, which contains both the affected microorganisms as well as the biochar. And he really stressed that it has to be a continued application or a continued feeding of this product. It didn't help if the animals became sick. He had neighbors who came to him with sick animals, for example. He would recommend them to eat the feed, and they would use it for a while. But because of the costs, they would then stop, and then the animals would get sick again. So in order to maintain healthy animal status, he told from experience that this feed had to be used continuously. And he did everything he could to introduce as much of this affected microorganism into the animal feed as possible. So with the cows, he was producing his own silage, which he was inoculating with the effective microorganisms. So he was using 2 liters of a liquid inoculum per cubic meter. And at his farm, he was, during the springtime when they were bringing in a lot of hay, he was producing 4,000 liters of this inoculum per week in order to produce the silage for the year on his farm. And he wasn't using, and so this, we got to look at this silage, and it didn't smell sour, it didn't have that silage smell to it. It was a little bit fruity smelling, and it smelled like a very good silage. So it seemed like this inoculum helped the fermentation process of the straw itself. And he himself didn't use biochar, but it's possible to use biochar in this stage as well. It may create some problems because the biochar has a high pH, and during the silage production, it's an acidifying process. So that may slow down the process in the beginning before you get the good fermentation going. So as I understand, that's a little bit tricky, and he didn't use the biochar in this stage, but his cows still got biochar through the carbon feed that he was still giving them. So these were the impressions I got from the farm, and that made me wonder, actually the main impression I got from the farm is that he was very happy with using effective microorganisms, and it worked very well for him. And I asked him, what about biochar? Does it help? And he said, yes, definitely. The biochar allowed the animals to be even more stable. So through his experience, it was another level of improvement with the use of biochar with EM. So I was wondering how biochar could help in this situation, what it is about biochar that is helping this probiotic or type of situation where the farmer is introducing healthy bacteria to the animals, and the biochar is helping the animals to maintain their health. So from what I could see from the literature and what we've also heard today is that toxins such as botulinum toxin are reduced in the animal body using biochar, and also pesticides like glyphosate have been shown to be reduced in the animal when they eat biochar. Biochar was shown to reduce certain pathogenic bacteria, including E. coli, while not affecting the usual, the good microflora, or even increasing the occurrence of lactobacillus, for example. And biochar has been likened to low levels of antibiotics. So there were studies showing that it's as effective as small amounts of antibiotics. I also saw that biochar is a little bit less efficient as activated carbon, and that these two are also less efficient as bentonite. So bentonite would be the ideal, the optimum product for binding toxins or maybe disabling pathogens, but biochar still does its work. And I found one study at least that showed that pyrolysis temperature of the biochar determines its effect on how much reduction in methane emissions you get. So here's a study that I found that looks at in vitro production of methane. So since I've worked with different biochars, and especially how biochar or pyrolysis temperature influences biochar properties, I wanted to give you a glimpse of what this means. So first of all, you know that biochar properties depend very much on what feedstock it is produced from. So here you have a corn cob biochar on the top and a miscanthus biochar on the bottom. And in the middle, in this case, it's hydrochar, but low temperature biochars, meaning 250 degree slow pyrolysis, might also give you a somewhat brown biochar as compared to a well-carbonized black biochar. There must be some biochar in the air here. Okay, so I want to give an insight into the transformations that happen with pyrolysis temperature. So if you look, this is showing you the change in the biochar yield with pyrolysis temperatures. So you have the feedstock shown in green at the top left, showing 100% biomass. And as you go down, as you go up in temperature treatment, you get less and less biochar. And you see that most of the loss in biomass happens between 200 and 400 degrees. That's where the transformation happens in a way. And I've worked a bit on biochar stability and found that for grass feedstock biochars, there wasn't very much difference in the stability of biochar once you reach a threshold of 370 degrees. So biochar is biochar in terms of stability in my study at least. And also if I were to show you a figure showing elemental composition of hydrogen to carbon versus temperature, you would see the same trend, that it's this curve with most of the change in the biochar happening between 200 and 400 degrees. But it's a very different story when looking at the surface properties. So pH starts at 6 and 5 in this case, and goes up to 10. Again, most of the change happening up to 400 degrees. But then cation exchange capacity, shown in the middle, tells a little bit different story, that you have a slight increase in the ability of biochar to bind cations, and then again a decrease. So the optimum, the peak is at 400 degrees. And on the bottom is surface area, and you see that there's a sharp peak at 600 degrees, where you get a biochar with high surface area. Otherwise, you have low values. So this means to me that production temperature does change different things in biochars, and we have a glimpse of some of these changes, but there's a lot more happening, and a lot. For example, I'm not showing you electrical conductivity, and there are many more things that happen with biochar. I looked at the carbon structure of biochar, because this is the bulk of what biochar is made of. And there are methods to look at something called the aromaticity, which is how many aromatic rings there are, as compared to aliphatic carbon chains, which is more common in non-charred biomass. And condensation, which is the size of the sheets made out of these aromatic rings as they condense. And so you see that for aromaticity, it's increasing in the beginning, and then it plateaus above 400 or 500 degrees, and that condensation increases continuously. So this also gives you a glimpse of the carbon structure of biochar changing with pyrolysis temperature. So the message I want to give with this is that pyrolysis temperature is one of the very important things for giving you a product, and we really do need to, especially with scientific studies, we need to know what kind of biochars we're working with if we're to get a better understanding of how biochar works in the animal gut, or when we try to trap nutrients on the surface. So I just want to point out that there are several mechanisms for when biochar interacts with compounds when they're sorbed onto the surface, because it can be through hydrogen bonding and electrostatic interactions, which are important for compounds such as dissolved organic carbon that have a charge, as well as hydrophobic interactions, which are important for organic contaminants. And then when it comes to the other processes, because these first ones are more dependent on the surface functional groups of the biochars, whereas the carbon structure may influence more the sorption of polar aromatic compounds. So that's all the science I'm going to bother you with today. I would just like to conclude that we have a rough understanding of how biochar properties change with temperature, and we need to be aware of which biochar we use in order to learn which properties are relevant for making an effective biochar feed supplement. And these same ideas apply for when we want to produce biochar-enriched fertilizers, for example, where we use biochars to combine with fertilizers to get a more stable nutrient source. Yeah, so I would like to thank you for your attention.
Questions? Stuart?
Maybe the one slide in particular that I didn't quite know if you included to draw the aromaticity and condensation principles you were speaking about there. That doesn't correlate, obviously, to me, just off the top of the head of what that means and what that means for functional properties of a biochar, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, or just depends. How would you draw conclusions about that, or correct us one way or the other?
It's, I think what I meant by that is that you have, if you know you have polar aromatic compounds, then that would be more important to get, in order to get the pi-pi electron donor acceptor interactions. You might want a high temperature biochar that has more aromatic structures that are able to participate in these kinds of bonds.
And therefore would have maybe different properties if used as a filter media or a mediation agent or something like that versus things with feed properties?
No, I think it's, I mean, sorption is sorption, and as I understand from literature, there have been quite a lot of studies regarding sorption of heavy metals and sorption of pesticides, and I think we need to, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think there are many more people here who know more about this topic, regarding sorption of other different types of compounds. At least I don't really have a very good understanding of what kinds of behaviors different compounds have, different types of compounds have to biochar with the temperature change.
Can you use the microphone? So I had a question on a comment you made about, in terms of binding efficiency, biochar being somewhat less effective than activated carbon and somewhat less effective than bentonite. Are you saying that based on peer-reviewed literature, and is it, what toxins are they talking about? Is it a generalized statement, or is it pesticides or metals, or what was that based on?
I have to look because I don't remember.
Okay, anybody else?
What does time have to do with, how does it relate to the temperature?
Retention time during pyrolysis.
Yeah, so you bring it up to a certain temperature, but you say nothing about how long it has to stay at that temperature to have those characteristics.
Yeah. I'm assuming that retention time depends very much on the pyrolysis unit that you have, because you want heat transfer, or you want all of the biomass in your reactor to go through the transformation at the temperature that you bring the biomass to. So I'm assuming that you need to find out for the specific reactor what it takes to transform all of the biomass homogeneously. And that may be 1 hour for one reactor, and it may be something else for another reactor.
So it doesn't matter how long necessarily, as long as it's all turned in, as long as it becomes carbon totally, all of it is turned into biochar.
And I think it does take some time to bring a biomass up to a certain temperature, let's say 600 degrees. It does, even though it's exposed, it still takes time to get through your particles. So I think the best way to answer your question is experimentally, because I don't know.
Well, I would like to say something, and Claudia or Bruno can correct me if I'm wrong here, but residence time is one of the variables that does have an influence, but it's probably less so than what the feedstock is and what the temperature is. Agree? Disagree?
Feedstock size matters.
Yeah.
You know, so because wood is such a very good insulator, it takes the penetration time, and so it depends on, you gave the right answer. It really depends on what kind of reactor you've got. You've got gasification where you expose the material to flames, or if you put it into a retort, or you put it through a screw pyrolysis unit, that might have differences. But I think it's too far to trying to get answers, technical answers like that from you in this case. You know, so, but if we make it in an open fire, and it's the operator who regulates the temperature, regulates the amount of emissions, and the reduction of hopefully ash Right? So the optimization of the char production. So it all varies, depending on the technology and the size of the feedstock. So the thicker the material, the slower the process. So that's why there's no point in trying to use large-size firewood, which you could use to heat something, then turn it into char just for the sake of making char. Right?
I think in most chars that we analyze in the lab, they're usually produced on a small scale, and they usually have a retention time of at least a half an hour, and they might compare a retention time of half an hour with 1 hour, and then you don't see that much of a difference because it's all carbonized. You don't get beyond complete carbonization.
I fully agree with you, and from a scientific point of view, I would argue the best indicator for, let's say, any type of reactivity and or stability of the char is the H/C ratio, because it's an integration of what we discussed here, temperature, size, and residence time. So the result you get, you can express as a mean H/C ratio, and you yourself was lead author of this article where you correlated the H/C ratio versus the mean residence time in the environment. So I think just measure this, and then we can say it's not worth discussing again about this issue. It's clear that we have a variability of technologies and this kind of stuff, but it's how can you translate it into the desired property of your product? And I think the best way is just this simple H/C ratio. And there's no further discussion necessary, because otherwise you will not advance, because it might be this and that. And so it's complicated enough, but with this respect, I'm quite safe with the H/C ratio, and that's fine. But you should do it best, because it's your product.
Suggestion. Yes. I think when we talk about all those different mechanisms and different and key parameters to determine properties of biochar, we forget about pore size, which also depending on the micropores, mesopores, and micropores, we will have different absorption mechanism. And I think the reason why you have activated carbon more active in comparison with biochar, because you have high micropore volume, high amount of those micropores. And this is probably the reason why you have a peak at 600 degrees in a surface area due to high amount again of micropores. So this would be, I think, important addition to when you describe the mechanism and properties.
I agree.
Yeah, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that for those of you who've used the process reactor before and tested it yourself, you'll quickly see when the residence time is correct. Because, you know, it's like baking a cake. You see when the cake is baked, and you see when it's underbaked, and you see when it's overbaked. It's very simple things you can do and it'll differ with each process reactor. So, you know, it's either fully charred, or depending on your reactor, it could be too charred. You know, you might, depending on your biochar yields, you might be getting not enough. And so there could be some optimization, you know, if it's a screw reactor or such. So.
Okay, thanks very much, Alice.